Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, you'll hear a few minor news and notes around the silver and black as far as visits coming for the upcoming NFL draft. Plus, Matt Miller and Jordan Reid. I got a couple more sound bites that I want you to hear from their pre-draft conference call, and I'll start to focus in on the NFL draft. What do I mean by that? Who do I think the Raiders should select at number 7 or whenever they get their first pick? I'll start to narrow it down. I haven't come to a conclusion yet, but I've started to narrow it down. Plus, I'll talk about the players or the positions that I think they need to come out of the NFL draft with. Your calls and texts will close out the show. It's all coming up on a busy Tuesday, April 4th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won, and won, and won, and won, and won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thanks so much for making the show the first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest edition of the show whenever it becomes available, as soon as it becomes available. And if you're checking us out on YouTube, we do appreciate you. Over 5,000 subscribers. It's been great, the growth of the show, and that's all because of my guy, Ari. You can check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. Does a great job making sure we're up every single day on YouTube at a certain time. So check him out on Twitter again. Show him a little appreciation at Ari Produces. And if you're checking us out on YouTube, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. We appreciate that as well. I want to go ahead and jump into the news and notes and really want to talk about visits that are happening this week or have already happened this week. And according to Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, he put out that the Raiders are hosting Kentucky quarterback Will Levis on a top 30 visit at the facility today, and that was on Monday. So the Raiders hosted Will Levis already. So they're doing all their due diligence on all the quarterbacks: C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, Levis, Anthony Richardson, and of course they'll do their due diligence on others as well. So Will Levis was in the building in Henderson, the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center, for a top 30 visit. That was on Monday. Anthony Richardson, according to Jeremy Fowler from ESPN, will actually visit with the Raiders on Friday and actually get his pre-draft, his top 30 visits started with the Raiders, and that won't be until Friday. And of course, Anthony Richardson is one of those guys that have become very intriguing as far as the quarterback position goes, and can he be that franchise quarterback moving forward? But he'll start his visits on Friday with the Raiders. Also, according to my guy Aaron Wilson in Houston, said Alabama safety Brian Branch, who is one of the most instinctive defensive players in the draft, has multiple visits and is regarded as a strong first-round target for teams, has visits with the Texans, Washington Commanders, the Raiders, the Vikings, Lions, and also the Atlanta Falcons. And then he has a private workout with the Buffalo Bills. So there you go. Will Levis in the building on Monday. Anthony Richardson will be in the building on Friday. And sometime this week, Alabama safety Brian Branch will also be visiting the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center for one of his top 30 visits. So the Raiders are doing their due diligence. They'll have a local day as well, as all teams have a local day. So they'll be able to bring in more players to the facility. But there are some pretty big names right there: Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, and Brian Branch, all guys that the Raiders are doing their due diligence on. Also, the new numbers for the free agents that the Raiders signed in free agency, and they signed 16 players. They rolled out their new numbers on Monday, so we'll go over them pretty quickly. Marcus Epps, safety. He's going to be rocking the number 1. Remember I said somebody's going to be rocking the number 0. I don't know who that's going to be. Maybe that's going to be a draft pick, but Marcus Epps, the safety, will get number 1. DeAndre Carter, the wide receiver, he'll be rocking the number 3. Jimmy Garoppolo, quarterback, he'll be rocking number 10, which he's always rocked throughout the course of his NFL career, so no surprise there. Philip Dorsett, wide receiver, number 11. Jacoby Myers, wide receiver, 16. Those are all, just status quo. Duke Shelley, cornerback at 23. David Long Jr., cornerback, 24. And that number 24 obviously is a historical number when it comes to the silver and black and the cornerback position, and not just anyone could rock it. The last guy that had it was Jonathan Abram. We know how that shook out. That number shouldn't be for everybody, but the Raiders don't retire numbers. So when you wear that number, you got to wear that number with pride, and there's a big responsibility that came with that number. And I'll tell you, growing up playing sports, there were certain numbers that I didn't want nothing to do with, right? Like playing hoops, everyone wants to rock number 23. No, I'm good. I don't need to rock that number. That number is that's too much pressure right there. So don't need to rock that number. But David Long Jr. has the responsibility of rocking the number 24. Jaquan Johnson, the safety, he's going to be rocking 26. Brandon Faison, the cornerback, 31 he's got. Robert Spillane, linebacker, 42. That's a big-time number when it comes to the linebacker position, or just a number in general, right? You think of number 42 and you think of a big, heavy hitter. So Robert Spillane's got a lot of responsibility rocking that number 4 too. Jacob Bobenmoyer, the long snapper, number 50. Cam Sims, the wide receiver, is rocking 81. Austin Hooper, tight end, 82. O.J. Howard, tight end, 88. John Jenkins, the defensive tackle, 95. And Jordan Willis, defensive lineman, number 99. So those are the numbers that the new free agents for the Silver and Black will be rocking in 2023. Now, look, again, I've said it multiple times, all those guys aren't going to make the team. Some of those guys are going to get to training camp, and they're just not going to make it. Some guys might not even get to training camp. Some guys might get released after the draft. But for right now, those are the guys that have those numbers. Also, as we close out segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, wanted to get into a little bit of sound from Matt Miller and Jordan Reid from ESPN. They had their pre-draft conference call on Friday. It was about an hour long, hour strong. Really good stuff. I got 2 sound bites that I wanted you to hear. One, actually both are from Jordan Reid, but the first one from Jordan Reid is about the fact that he has 7 or 8 late-round quarterbacks selected, and if that has to do with the success that Brock Purdy had a year ago as the last pick of the draft, what they called Mr. Irrelevant. Obviously, he turned out to be very relevant for the 49ers, but here's Jordan Reid on the number of quarterbacks that he has selected in his mock draft and why you should be taking a late-round pick.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. When I was making the mock draft, Brock Purdy was a name that just kept being in my head, as far as there's no reason for you not to take a late-round quarterback this year, even if you're 1 and 2 are set. We saw what happened to the 49ers in the NFC title game. You don't want to be in a situation of, if that happens to you, you want to have that emergency player off of the bench. But those late round guys are like lottery tickets to me. And Brock Purdy was a great example of that. And we've seen guys in years past that have gone on to be those day 3 players that end up turning into starters. And even if they don't turn into starters for you, they end up turning into assets too. We've seen it in years past, whether it's a Jimmy Garoppolo when he was with the Patriots, Jacoby Brissett when he was coming out too. We've seen these late round quarterbacks go on to be lottery tickets in a sense. You never know what they could turn into. I think I had 13 overall quarterbacks being drafted in this draft class, which will be the most that we've seen in quite some time. But I think with these late round quarterbacks, I think we're going to see a record number be selected just so you can have that QB3 as insurance, or you could end up having a Brock Purdy type of situation of where you end up hitting on a late round player.
So there's Jordan Reid talking about late round quarterbacks and why it makes all the sense in the world to take one. And I do believe the Raiders will take one. They might take 2 quarterbacks in this upcoming draft. They might take one early and then take one late. And for that exact reason that Jordan Reid broke down, right? I mean, these guys could either end up being good players. They could end up being backups. They could end up being trade partners with someone else. I mean, teams always need to have quarterbacks. And if you find one, you're not always going to get a Brock Purdy in round 7 that's going to turn out to be really good. But unless you select him, you won't know. So there's some good stuff right there from Jordan Reid on why he had so many picks. And you heard him what he said. He had 13 quarterbacks selected in the draft. Also from Jordan Reid, cornerback that we're not really talking about a lot, but he's starting to climb up the draft boards, Maryland quarterback Deonte Banks. Here's Jordan Reid's thoughts on him.
Yeah, and then on Deonte Banks, one of my favorite players overall in this draft class. And kudos to Mel Kiper, who was the person that had him in his top 20 before anybody. He was the one that put both of us on Deonte Banks at the time. But just a strong, physical, big corner, 6 foot, right around that 200-pound range mark. And he has all the physical traits that you want to see at the position. The one area where you want to see get better at is just ball tracking, as far as seeing the ball in flight and making plays on it. He doesn't have the ball production that you're looking for at the position, but I think he compares very favorably to Marlon Humphrey, just because of the physicality that they play with, the alpha mentality that they play with, and just a bully in a sense. He loves getting his hands on wide receivers at the point of attack. He does really good jobs of filling them throughout route stems, and then you just want to see him make plays on the ball. I think that will come more with time as he gets more experience, but he compares very favorably to Marlon Humphrey just because of the physical traits and just the physicality that they play with in coverage, but also as in run support too.
So there you go, Jordan Reid on Maryland cornerback Deonte Banks, and just brought that to the table because I'm talking about cornerbacks, I'm talking about defensive players, tackles, edge rushers. Obviously, the Raiders need help on defense and all levels of the defensive side of the ball. Doesn't necessarily have to be in the top 10. You can't fix all your woes with one pick, right? So maybe a guy, if they trade back, maybe a guy to look at, Deonte Banks, that not a lot of people are talking about, but could end up becoming one of the really good players in this upcoming draft. So there you go. I thought that was good intel. Jordan Reid on Maryland quarterback Deonte Banks. Coming up in segment number 2, who do I have locked in as the pick at number 7 or whenever the Raiders make their first selection, and what do they need to come out of the draft with? Well, I haven't locked in a guy yet, but we'll talk about it and I'll break it down. I'll give you my thoughts coming up in segment number 2. I'll do that after I tell you about Built Bar. I've been telling you about Built Bar for quite a while and the March Madness challenge that is going on. And, of course, the national championship, the champion has been crowned, right? I mean, we saw that Monday night. Really good stuff. BuiltMarchMadness.com. Just have a little bit time left to go ahead and get your vote on. My UCLA was out a long time ago, but my cookies and cream is still rocking. So whatever bar or puff you want to vote for, you can do right now at BuiltMarchMadness.com. Anyone who gets their vote on will be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built. And not only that, one Locked On fan will win a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to their door. And I've told you so many times why you need to try Built Bar. I mean, of course, it's great tasting, low in calories, low in sugar, high in protein. It's just what you need for that pick-me-up, that snack, get you through work, get you through whatever you got going on. Maybe you're, working out and you just want a little something. Built Bar is perfect for that. So right now, go to BuiltMarchMadness.com, get your final vote on for your favorite bar or puff, and while you're there, pick up a box of your favorite flavor or try a new one and see how you like it. Great flavors, something for everyone. You can get the marshmallows, which are the puffs, or you can get the OG flavors, like I like to call them, which are just the regular Built Bars. But check it out today, BuiltMarchMadness.com. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to really start to focus in on the NFL draft. We've been talking about the draft a lot, but really want to focus in as it's less than a month away. Of course, round 1 will be April 27th. So, just a few weeks away, and we'll be talking about not who the Raiders should pick, but who the Raiders did select in round 1, then rounds 2 and 3, and then the rest of the draft. And then we'll really be talking about how the team got better. And if they don't get better in this draft with 12 picks coming up, then something went terribly wrong. So I'm assuming that we'll talk about how much better they got with the draft. But again, that's a big assumption because we've seen many drafts come and go where it didn't shake out as well. So here we go. Who am I getting locked in on at pick number 7, or even whenever the Raiders pick? Maybe they trade up. There's reports that they might trade up to number 3. Who knows? They might trade back. A lot of people suggest trade back, collect more picks. But at some point, you got to pick someone. And I think the farther you trade back, the less chance of getting an alpha dog you can get. So I'm just going to go on the basis that they're going to pick at number 7. And this is actually a subject that I had on Raider Nation Radio 920, Unnecessary Roughness, on Monday, and I thought it was a really good subject, so I wanted to bring it to the podcast as well. And the question I threw out there is, who have you locked in on that you think that the Raiders should pick at number 7, and what do they need to come out of the draft with? And what I mean by that is positions. So these are my positions. One was, and it's not in any particular order, so don't think I'm leaning in any direction. These are the positions that I think they have to come out of the draft with. A shutdown corner, some interior help, some edge help. I just kind of have that like this or that, defensive tackle or an edge rusher, and then a potential quarterback of the future. I think that they have to come out of the draft with all those areas addressed. Again, a shutdown corner, either a tackle or an edge, and then a potential quarterback of the future. Those are the 3 areas that I'm looking at. When you have 12 picks, you can really start to focus in and start to pinpoint the players that you want in particular. So this is how I think the draft is going to go, and then I'll get into who I'm focusing on. And I'll tell you right now, I have not come to a conclusion on who I think that they should take at number 7, but I am narrowing it down. All right, and this is how I'm narrowing it down based off what I believe the first 5 are going to look like. I think the draft really gets a little crazy and a little freaky starting at number 6 with Detroit. But at number 1 with Carolina, C.J. Stroud. I think he goes top dog. Bryce Young goes number 2 to Houston. I think Will Anderson goes number 3 to Arizona. Will Levis, number 4 to Indy, and then Jalen Carter goes number 5 to Seattle. Those are top 5. Those I feel pretty comfortable with. Even if there's a trade there, even if Indianapolis happens to trade up to number 4 and Arizona, or up to number 3 and Arizona drops to number 4, I still think those are the same players that are off the board, some shape, somehow, by 5. So then all of a sudden it opens up a big Pandora's box, right? At 6 with Detroit, you can take Christian Gonzalez, Devin Witherspoon, Tyree Wilson. Those are the options I think are there at number 6. And then at number 7, Christian Gonzalez, Devin Witherspoon, Tyree Wilson, or Anthony Richardson. And really, I guess you could throw Anthony Richardson in there for Detroit as well. So if you have all 4 of those players in position number 6, which I believe will be there, okay, I look at Detroit and say, okay, Q, who do you think they'll take? I believe they take one of the corners. And that's just my gut feeling. Of course, this is nothing that someone's told me. This is just what I think. I think they either go Christian Gonzalez or Devin Witherspoon, which then would leave Tyree Wilson, one of those corners, and then Anthony Richardson on the board. So that's why I think it's so difficult. I think that they, as I mentioned, need to get a shutdown corner. They need to get some edge help and a potential quarterback of the future. That's all 3 right there. But you can't pick 3 guys with 1 pick. You can only pick 1. So what direction do you go? right? I mean, Tyree Wilson is the guy that I think can really fill the void for two spots. He could be edge help. He could be interior help. He's a big dude who can get bigger. He's still a little raw, so he's not exactly where he needs to be, but he's a guy whose motor doesn't quit, and that's something I'm excited about. That's why I'm excited to talk about Joey McGuire, who I'll talk to sometime this week, talking about Tyree Wilson. His motor just does not stop. So if you put him on that defensive line, you put him out there with Max Crosby, you put him out there with the Chandler Jones, they can have some really good things happening, right? So Tyree Wilson is a guy that's at the top of my list. I don't know which one Detroit goes with, Christian Gonzalez or Devin Witherspoon, but you could just say one of those two are going to be left, and then Anthony Richardson. And I'm not quite 100% sold on Richardson yet, but I'll tell you right now, I'm getting close. I'm getting really close because I keep thinking about, and I don't want to get caught up on what he did at the combine, what he did at his pro day. I really want to think about what he's done in college. And the problem with what he's done in college is it's only a small sample size. 13 games is nothing. So you think about it, he's only 20 years old, right? This is what's going through my mind. This is why it's so difficult. He's only 20, right? He doesn't have to start right away. The Raiders have Jimmy G. He can come in for some packages. He can get excited. I mean, even the defense would get excited to see Anthony Richardson out there, right? He sounds like a guy that is willing to learn. He's very intelligent. He's, there's a whole lot of things. He's coming in for a visit on Friday. So Josh McDaniels and company will learn how good he is on the whiteboard. A lot of people ask me, well, didn't they already have dinner with him? What's the point of the visit? Well, the visit is the whiteboard. The visit is, getting up there and Josh McDaniels drawing up a play, explaining it to him, and then, okay, erasing it, and, hey, run that play back to me, and kind of getting his retention. What can he figure out? Show him around the facility, maybe introduce him to some of the players. It's a lot more just, one-on-one, get to know the football player, where the dinner is more just like get to know the person. Right? Just kind of get to know what makes him tick. What is he like? This, that, and the other. It's very informal, where the top 30 visits is like really kind of intense work, even though it's not, necessarily going out into the facility and throwing the ball around. It's a lot of the schoolwork. So that should be interesting to see exactly how that shakes out. But from everything I've heard, the dude is super intelligent. So there's a lot there, but I keep saying that I think that they need to get a dog at number 7. They need to get a guy who's a difference maker. So I just feel like, as much as I'm leaning towards Anthony Richardson, and again, it's only April 4th, so I have plenty of time to change my mind, right? And I'm going to do the research, and every bit of research I do, I'll bring to the show like I always do, and it'll help influence my decision. At some point, I'll put out my final decision on where I think the Raiders need to go with number 7. So right now, I'm really leaning with one of the corners or Tyree Wilson, just because I think that they make the immediate impact where you don't get the return from Anthony Richardson. But I'll tell you what, man, he is that little player on my shoulder that's saying, Q, select me, Q, select me, Q, select me. I'm the quarterback of the future for many, many years. It's going to be amazing. I'll be awesome in Allegiant Stadium. Like, he's doing that. He's that guy right now. I'm not going to lie to you. That is that guy. So right now, again, I'm really leaning heavily corner or Tyree Wilson, with Anthony Richardson just really close behind, and me close to pulling the trigger, just because you don't know the next chance that the Raiders are going to have to get a dynamic quarterback, right? And maybe he'll be that guy, maybe he won't be that guy, right? I mean, what's the chances that 4 quarterbacks get drafted in the top 10 and they all turn out to be really good? That's another area that I've been thinking about. So there's that. But right now, as far as I'm concerned, what they have to come out of with this draft, one way, one how, is a shutdown corner, a defensive tackle or edge help, and then a potential quarterback of the future. Those are the 3 areas that they have to address. They have 12 picks. They can make that happen. Christian Gonzalez, shutdown corner. Devin Witherspoon, shutdown corner. Tyree Wilson, that's edge and defensive tackle help. I think that could be both in the same category. And again, number 6 with Detroit is where I think that the draft really gets, pretty intense. Now, there could always be trades. There's reports of like Tennessee wanting to trade up. Those reports are out there. But if it just stays the way it is right now, that's how I think it all shakes out. So what's on your mind? Who do you have locked in, if you have someone locked in, with the Raiders' first pick at number 7? And then what do you think that they need to come out of the draft with? 707-654-4693. Remember, I said shutdown corner, defensive tackle or edge help, and then potential quarterback of the future. But I do want to know what you think. Your calls and texts are coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation, segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Big Roo in the 925. He's going to start us off. He's calling to talk about a podcast that he heard that had previous Raiders on the show and gives his thoughts. Here he is, Big Roo in the 925.
Hey, what's going on, Q? Big Roo from the 925. just want to call real quick and talk to you about this interview or podcast, I should say, called Big Time Talks. It's their first, I believe it's their first episode, and it's Hank, it's Mo, Kendall Vickers, and they start talking about just them in general, but move on to talking about the Raiders and how Patriots way and stuff like that. But they give some good insight on what's like last year and the years before. And one thing that I took away from it was that they feel like Jimmy G would be a better fit because he can move around a little bit better, and Derek Carr wasn't making any moves. Coming from Mo and Hank and Kendall, they're basically saying that our offensive line was actually doing pretty good, and they're not worried about the O-line this year. So just want to see your take on that. Rule from the 925 out.
Thanks for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And I mean, I can see Jimmy G being better for multiple reasons, right? I mean, he is a guy that's going to have an understanding of what Josh McDaniels wants to do, even though he hasn't played in the system in quite a while. Still has a basic knowledge of Josh McDaniels, what he expects out of his quarterback, you know, how his system works, who he needs to go to the ball, go to with the ball as soon as possible. Plus, he's a guy that not only is willing to use his feet, but he's going to stand in the pocket probably a little bit more. But the problem is he'll take that shot in the pocket, and he'll also get injured, right? Those are the two things I'm worried about. You got to cross your fingers and hope he doesn't get injured, and that's never a good way to live. He's just an injury-prone guy, and that's unfortunate. So the Raiders have to make a decision on if he gets injured and is going to miss some time, who's going to be the guy that slides into that position that they feel comfortable with taking over if he gets hit. But, yeah, I can see him being a guy that's willing to use his legs. Like I said, he'll stand in the pocket a little bit more than Derek Carr would, and he'll take a hit. Right, kind of like Jarrett Stidham did against the 49ers last year, where he stood in there and took that last hit, and even though he had rolled out, but I mean, he knew that big hit was coming. He took it and delivered a strike to Devontae Adams and went for a touchdown, and came up with his mouth bloody. Right, there's things that Jimmy G will do, but you know, my big concern, as everyone knows from the jump, has been the fact that he's injury prone, and that's never ever a good way to go. But thank you for that call, my man. I do appreciate you. Next up, got a text from G Sykes 757. It says, "Hey Q, G Sykes from the 757 here. I just one thing listening to the conversation between you and GM Dave Ziegler. Dave said continuity is key, and they are bringing back much of the coaching staff from last season. So my question is, why not give Derek Carr one more year learning and understanding McDaniel's system? I know it's water under the bridge now, but I truly believe Carr would have been much better in year 2 with this system." That's G Sykes 757. Thanks for the text. And I thought the same thing, to be honest. I thought that they would definitely bring him back for a second year because of all the times that he's had new coordinators and new coaches. He's always done a lot better in year 2. But the staff, Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler, made the decision that, what they were going to pay him this upcoming year wasn't worth it. Wasn't worth what they were getting out of him. They made the decision that he wasn't the guy that they wanted, and they wanted to move in another direction. So they made that decision. They made the move, and now they got to live with it. They brought in Jimmy G. Obviously, they're going to draft someone at some point. So, I mean, it kind of is what it is. It doesn't really matter why they didn't give him a year 2. They just didn't give him a year 2. They decided that the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, and that's just something that we'll have to see how it plays out. He might go to New Orleans and ball out, and then everyone could say, "Oh, see, told you so," right? You give him a good team, and he'll do some great things, or maybe he won't. Maybe Jimmy G will be the Raiders quarterback and be fantastic, or maybe he won't. I mean, it's just something we don't know the answer to. But ultimately, the answer we do know is that they weren't willing to stick with Derek Carr. They gave him a contract extension that allowed them to get out of it after 1 year. He knew that. He signed it. He was okay with that, and they made the decision to move on. So I personally think it's a clean break for everybody. I think that it was something that was probably needed for the staff, for the team, for Derek. And, it's just, like I said, it is what it is. I really don't spend a whole lot of time talking about Carr anymore because he's now the Saints quarterback and not the Raiders. So really, at this point, like you said, it's water under the bridge. Thank you for that text. I appreciate you. Next up, got a call from Chuck in Austin, a.k.a. Austin Raider. He's calling about what the Raiders need to not do when it comes to the upcoming draft. Here he is, Chuck in Austin.
Gio, what's up, buddy? This is Chuck over here, Austin Raider. Giving you a quick call. The Raiders in the draft need to avoid going DB in the first round. And I'll give you a little history on their DBs, going from Carl Joseph, Gary Conley, Obi, Trayvon Mullen, Jonathan Abraham, Damon Arnett, DJ Hayden. I can keep going, but you don't win in the NFL on the back end. You win in the trenches. Go and get the big beef eaters up front. Give me a D lineman. Hopefully they just take the best D lineman that falls to them. They're going to get a good chance to get one of these kids that are really good either on the inside or outside of the D line. And that's where you start. The DBs are going to be there later in the draft. And they'll be able to get somebody decent in the third and fourth round. I just look at the history of DBs, and I'm just like, look at what Detroit did when they drafted Jeffrey Okudah. I believe the kid's at Ohio State. I mean, he never worked out. I just think the failure rate at DB is too great. And I just think you need to go and get the trenches. They need to push up the middle of that D line and get some linebackers to cover the middle of the field. I like the guy that did the spreadsheet on Ziegler's drafts. He goes line. I mean, and he did that last year with Parham. And then the 2 D tackles he took. So I look for them to correct that D line and try and work on that. Don't mind the DBs in the third and fourth rounds, but the DBs are going to be there. All right, buddy. Love what you do. Have a great day.
Thanks so much for the call, my man. I appreciate you, and I understand completely what you're saying, but my opinion, if there's a higher ranked DB on your board than the highest ranked defensive lineman, why would you take the lower ranked guy? Like, I try to make it as simple as possible so people could understand. If you can go to the report card school, right, and you can select your own report card, and you had an option of selecting an A or you could select a B, why would you select a B? You know what I mean? Like, that's the easiest way to put it. As a guy that didn't get a lot of A's on my report card, if I could select A's, I would, right? Instead of a B, instead of a C, instead of a D or F, I'd much rather select an A. So why would you select, a player that you have graded in this draft process as an A? Why would you pass an A up for a B? That's what I don't understand, especially in the corner or the defensive line position where those are areas of need as well. Now, if you had the same grade, like say you have a cornerback and a defensive lineman, they both are A's, then just take which one you think is going to give you the biggest impact, right? Then your biggest need, that could be the tiebreaker. But if you have a corner labeled an A or a defensive lineman labeled a B, there's no reason to take the defensive lineman that's a B. And if you have a defensive lineman and a B corner, don't take the B corner, take the A defensive lineman, right? I mean, that's just, again, to me, I try to make things as simple as possible, and that's the most simple way I could put it. I'm going to take the A 99.9% of the time over the B, and I don't even know what that 0.1% of the reason would be why I take the B, unless it's someone that you just can't use, like a Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson is an A running back, but there's no way that the Raiders are in position to take a running back at number 7. They're just not in that position, and he'll be long gone, probably in the top. They'll probably go number 10 to Philadelphia, but I mean, he'll be long gone. If the Raiders had a stacked team and they were just literally having the opportunity to pick the best player available, then by all means take Bijan Robinson. But they have way too many holes on the defensive side of things, and they need a quarterback, so you can't really just go, well, I'm just going to go best player available. It's got to be, at least for this draft, best player available in position of need, as far as I'm concerned. But thank you so much for the call, my man. I do appreciate you. Next up, got a text from the Raven. It says, good afternoon, Q. This is a PM rather than a part 3 of the podcast. I'm not sure what that means, but he says, your boy Scott Gulbranson doubled down on his take the other day that in his opinion, Anthony Richardson will be converted to a tight end in the NFL. I know those were not your words, and you have begun to tilt your own observation that AR could indeed be a viable first-round option for the Silver and Black. But damn, what is up with LV Gully? That's from the Raven. Thank you for the text. And look, everyone's going to have their own opinion, right? I mean, how many guys came into the NFL and said, oh, he's got to be this or he's got to be that. He can't play this position. He can't play that position. Some are right. Some are wrong, right? I mean, obviously, there was a lot of conversation about Lamar Jackson had to turn into wide receiver when he was coming into the league, and he turned out to be an MVP quarterback. So, I mean, just because one guy gave the opinion that, Anthony Richardson's got to be a tight end, that's just his opinion. I wouldn't worry about it. I think he's going to be a good quarterback because he has the potential to get better, right? He's got the work ethic. He's very intelligent according to all reports. So I think that's what's going to help him. The problem with Anthony Richardson is he just doesn't have experience. He has 13 games under his belt. If he went back to Florida one more year, he very well could end up being like the first quarterback taken off the board next year, even though you have Caleb Williams and others that are going to, Drake May, that are going to fight for that number 1 spot. But if he went in and had a great year at Florida and showed improvement from a year ago, he very well with his size could end up literally being the number 1 overall pick, just like Cam Newton was. But he came out, so he took a shot. But it sounds like right now he's a top 5. So I don't know what Scott's saying. I mean, I respect his opinions. I respect a lot of different people's opinions because at the end of the day, that's all it is. It's just our opinion. I have the opinion he's going to be a good quarterback, but he might not be, right? I thought Jamarcus Russell was going to be good. Well, shows you what I knew, right? So there's that. And, I mean, we always have our misses. We always have our hits when it comes to the draft. And that's the thing about it. You just never really know what these guys are going to do on the next level. So it's just really a big crapshoot. So I wouldn't hold it against them. But, again, that's just kind of his opinion. So thanks so much for that text. I appreciate you. That's really all I got time for on today's show. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have Iowa Raider. I got a text from Hondo from Chico. Also got a couple different sound bites that I want you to hear. A couple more from Matt Miller and Jordan Reid from ESPN. As like I said, I was on that pre-draft conference call for about an hour. Some really good stuff. So I want to make sure you're able to hear a lot of that moving forward. And, of course, we'll have more conversation. We'll have some NFL draft guys coming up on the show sooner rather than later. Joey McGuire from Texas Tech, the head coach. He'll be on the show sooner rather than later. So we got a busy week coming up. I'm excited about it. Sooner rather than later, we'll be in Kansas City for the NFL draft. And then it'll really be on and popping, and we'll decide what the Raiders look like, what their team looks like, if they were able to get a lot better, which I do believe they should get better with having 12 draft picks. So that's all I got time for on today's show. Definitely appreciate everybody for making the show the first listen each and every day. Remember, if you find the show on YouTube and check it out on YouTube, that's because of my guy Ari. You can find him on Twitter at Ari Produces. So tomorrow, Raider Nation, till tomorrow, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.